How's it going today?
Glad, glad to be here, man. Absolutely wonderful. Work last night, got to work tonight, so I'm, bright and sunshiny.
So I believe you grew up in the bustling metropolis of Plaquemine. Tell me about that.
Well, all right. Well, first, I was actually born in Baton Rouge. My hometown is Plaquemine. I was born in Baton Rouge. At the time, my dad was a student at LSU. So for the first 2 years of my life, I lived on the LSU campus. Then once he graduated, we moved back to Plaquemine. And that's where I pretty much raised my entire life, other than the few years I was in the military.
And was your grandfather in Plaquemine?
Yes, he was a carpenter. He was originally from a small town called Oscar, Louisiana, which is up around False River, which is right next to Bush, Louisiana.
Mhm.
So somebody in my family had money, and but he moved to Plaquemine, and so my entire family was right here, born and raised here in Plaquemine.
What did your dad do for a living?
My dad was a civil engineer for the state. Like I said, he graduated from LSU, went to work for the state. He retired from the state. They hired him back as a consultant for twice the money. Then he retired again. That's what he always said. There's nothing to retirement. I've done it 3 times. And he opened up his own engineering business. And then I believe he sold that. And so now he actually, at 83 years old, he actually is retired.
Good for him. What about your mom?
My mom, well, she was born and raised here in Plaquemine also. She also retired from the state. She was a state employee. She went to work for the state as a secretary when she was 18 years old. And you got to love this. She retired when she was 48. She's now 80. So she's gotten more money from the state in retirement than what she did when she actually worked for them.
Ain't that something?
So she did pretty well. Yeah, she started off as a secretary. And when she retired, she was the assistant to the state treasurer. So
Okay.
she
What about siblings? Were you an only child?
yeah, once they were one and done with me. I'm the only child, no brothers, no sisters. I'm the baby of the family, spoiled rotten.
No, I guess you were plenty enough to deal with.
Yeah,
All
oh
right.
yeah,
So,
definitely.
growing up in Plaquemine, were you obviously with your grandfather in the wood shop, but were you driven to anything academically?
Well, I can't say that it was. I did go to LSU for a short time. Uh, I wanted to be an architect. I love architecture, still do to this day. Victorian houses, houses with curb appeal. Love architecture, and so went to LSU for about one semester. Decided to take. I was going to do a 4-year college degree in 3 years. Take accelerated classes. Went to an English class, and it was me, one other guy, about 20 girls during the summer, and they wore bikini tops and shorts, and the books and the grades went out the door. So that kind of ended my college career.
All right. What were you studying?
Architecture.
Okay. All right. Did that lead to your first marriage?
Uh, well, no, I can't say it did. That was just, I don't know, local romance. Fell in love, got married. I'm gonna really tell out of myself here. I'm on my third marriage now. My
Okay.
first one lasted 6 months.
All right.
So I was young and dumb, got married, and was divorced 6 months later. And
When was that? Was
so
that tied to school or after?
no, that was trying to remember the year, somewhere right around 1980, something like that.
Okay.
It was right out of high school,
Okay.
and so very short marriage. When we got divorced, told her, I said, look, you go. I was working on a boat at the time. I said, when you go home, you get your half of the stuff. I come home, I'll get my half of the stuff.
What got you on the boats to begin with?
All right. Then high school, and I was one of these people who were too cool for school.
All right.
I got I quit high school, which later on I did go back and get a GED. But anyway, I got out of quit school, and a good friend of mine was working for Midland, at Capital Marine. And he said, "Hey man, if you want a job, man, I can get you a job." And so I went and applied at Capital Marine. Didn't know anything about boats. Only tugboats I ever saw was the ones going up and down the Mississippi River.
Right.
And so I went there, worked there and I worked there at Capital Marine, not Capital Fleet, Capital
Right.
Marine.
What
Probably
year
about
was it?
let's see. This had to be 78, 79,
All
somewhere
right.
right in that area.
Tell me about deckhand. Tell me about deckhand onboarding at that time.
There was none. I mean, it was just they hired you. You showed up for work with boots and gloves, and that was it.
Yeah.
There wasn't any type of orientation. It was just walk on board. You're hired. Here, put the gloves on. Let's get it.
Right.
And it didn't matter day or night. You just went to work. So, which incidentally, the very first the very first tugboat that I ever set foot on was the Port Allen, which incidentally I am now one of the pilots on the Port Allen.
Right.
10 years later. So I worked a few days on the Port Allen. Then after that, they transferred me to a boat, which was at that time called the Cajun, and which nowadays is called Steve Alley. And so I worked on that, like I say, for about a year. And back then, the fleet, I'm not going to say line, not tugboat pilots, the fleet boat pilots, they were boatmen, okay? And they were characters. First guy that I worked for, well, when I first stepped on the Port Allen, I worked a couple of days, worked with a guy named Steve Rep, and he was also from Plaque. Then when I got on the Cajun, the pilot's name was Coan Bueche. They called him Coan. I have no idea what his real name was. And but man, these guys could run a boat. They did stuff with boats that the pilots nowadays, you can't do that, it's not safe. But they did it everyday occurrences.
Yeah.
And
I hated to hear Steve Rep was one of the first guys I met out there running one of ACBL's boats at a Tiger Fleet on a Z drive.
Yeah, well, so okay, so you're familiar with him.
Yeah, and I hate to hear. I was friends with him on Facebook, but over COVID, man. Anyway.
Yeah, he's passed, and
right.
Nice guy, man, real nice guy.
Yep.
And once again, he was a character. So anyway, I worked for Capital Marine for about a year. Then I decided I want to do something differently, and I went to work as a mechanic's apprentice for a company called Louisiana Vacuum. They had 18-wheelers where they'd go into the chemical plants and suck out all the chemicals and just bring them to wherever they were going to dispose them. Worked there for about a year, and which was a horrible job, man. 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, don't expect a day off. And so then I decided, you know what, I want to go back on the boat. So I went back to Capital Marine, and I walked in, and he just looked at it, goes, "Looking for a job?" I said, "Oh yeah." He goes, "Good. Be on the I think it was Paul Adams. Be on the Paul Adams tonight." So no application, no physical, just bring your boots, get your gloves, get on the boat.
Right.
And at that time, Paul Adams, which also belonged to Capital Marine, it was the lead boat for Capital Marine Fleet, and it was down there where what they call Old Dravo. It was at that time it was called the Port Allen Marine Cleaning Plant, and so we ran the fleet out of there.
And where was that on the river?
Right where Red Eye Fleet is now.
Okay.
I guess it's my 225. It's where Stone Fuel is at now.
Okay.
Stone Fuel sold out to, Port Allen Marine sold out to Trinity Marine, and then Trinity Marine sold it out to Stone Fuel. So Stone Fuel is at in Baton Rouge.
Okay.
We worked that for a while, and at that time, they got rid of the Paul Adams, and for a short period, we had the Gosma running in the fleet. And That's not a fleet boat, man.
Right.
It's funny because the guy who was captain, Charles Cannella. Oh boy, anybody who's been in the marine industry who knows Charlie Cannella, he was a character. Yeah, called everybody boo. Anyway, on the Gossamer, the throttles, you couldn't pull them just straight back. Like if you were going to go forward, you pull them into neutral, you had to slide it over, then pull it back. Well, he couldn't get accustomed to that. So we bounced off of more barges than you can believe. Can't tell you how many times he threw me on a barge. So we had that for a short time. And then that's when Midland built the Woody Dumas. And the Woody Dumas came down and it immediately took over as the lead boat in the fleet. And they had it in the Waterways Journal, man. Captain Charles Cannella and first mate Coan Bueche accept the Woody Dumas for Capital Marine Supply, Baton Rouge. And it was a very nice boat, very nice.
Okay. So your fame began early, huh, Mr.
Oh, yeah. If they only knew.
Yeah.
Somewhere I still, man, they gave us a wine goblet that had the Woody Dumas etched in it, into it, you know, because it was named after the mayor of Baton Rouge at the time. And
Okay.
still got it somewhere.
All right.
I had to dig it out. So anyway, so then I worked there for, I don't know, and I'm gonna be a little off on some of these times, but probably another year. And then don't know the reason, but I decided to go to work for Watson Marine down in Convent. And worked out of Convent for a while. It was close to that time, we just call it Watson Fleet. They serviced a couple grain elevators down there. Wasn't too bad of a job. It was a lot of work though, a lot of work. And that was when I decided, hey, you know what? I'm gonna try and live on a boat. So Watson owned some live-on boats and transferred to the Little Henry. And that time they were working out of what is Tiger Fleet now, up there where the cleaning, where TT Barge cleaning facility is at.
Right.
And so we they had the Little Henry and the Brandy Falgout. We worked the fleet up there, and when the big boats come down, they drop 30 barges. And once again, these were boatmen. Okay, 1,200 horsepower boat, grabbing hold of 15 loads and taking them southbound.
Yeah.
That's around Wilson. Captain on the boat was John. I think he just recently retired. And man, they could run a boat. Yeah, those guys were true boatmen.
Yeah.
And so did that for a while. I just got tired of living on a boat. It just wasn't for me. Too small. But I worked with some good guys, man. It was a nice boat. Then when I got tired of living on the boat, I decided to quit Watson. I went to work for Weber Marine down there right below the Sunshine Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And worked on a boat called the Marlowe, which I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's really a boat designed to deliver supplies to ships. Has a boom on the front of it.
Mm-hmm.
Small wheelhouse, not much of a second deck / galley, and that's about the extent of it. But not only did we bring supplies to ships, we also we'd work the fleet, cement dock, and every now and then you do tow work. It wasn't too bad of a job. It was pretty nice.
Right.
And after the Weber Marine, I can't remember what year that was. Well, it had to be 84, maybe 85, because that's when I went into the Coast Guard. I left when I quit Weber. That's when I went into the Coast Guard, and I did about 5 years of the greatest maritime service that there is, United States Coast Guard.
How was that process?
That was the absolute best decision I ever made in my life. Yeah. Absolute. I know a lot of people in our industry, the marine industry, they don't particularly care for the Coast Guard because it's more of a regulatory than the actual Coast Guard that I considered that I was in. Right. I was in search and rescue. drug enforcement. You know, we did very little. We did absolutely none of the regulatory stuff that, you know, tugboats are involved in. When I don't even know where to start with the Coast Guard, man.
Well, was there a boot camp?
Oh yeah. Well, let me tell you before going, okay?
All right.
Before I joined into the Coast Guard, I'd always had an admiration for people in the military. And I got a lot of family history in the military. When we have our family reunion, every branch of the military is represented there.
Okay.
And so I went to the National Guard, and I was just going to sign up, do the reserves, you know, I'm just going to go in National Guard Reserve and go with that. At that time, they gave you enlistment bonuses. And I don't know how they got my name, but Marines called me and said, hey, come talk to us. So I went to talk to them. And their recruiting office was right there. They had the Marines, the Navy, and the Army. All three of them had a recruiting office side by side.
Mm-hmm.
So I went talk to the Marines, and I went and talked to the Navy. And when you go in there, they give you, I can't remember if it was a 50 or 100 question little like pre-ASVAB test to see what jobs you would qualify for in the Navy. And so, man, I aced it, boy. This recruiter, he's like, oh yeah, we got this one. Man, you can do this and you can do that, you know. And so he was getting the paperwork for me to sign up for the reserve. And I can't tell you why I did it, but I just looked at him. I said, is there a Coast Guard recruiting office around? And you should have seen the look on his face, man. He just, why? I said, well, I want to go talk to them. So he goes, yeah, they got one, but it's all the way down in New Orleans. We went to Baton Rouge. And so I said, all right, well, before I sign anything, I'm going to talk to them. So I went down to New Orleans the next day, talked to them and saw that, you know, what all they had to offer. And I'd really never had any dealings with the Coast Guard. I don't even remember seeing a Coast Guard boat on the river at that time.
Right.
And so he's, you know, describing what the Coast Guard is. And I said, well, this is it. This is what I'm going to join. And so started filling out the paperwork. And I remember this. I can see it. I can see it right now. It's line 28 on the application. 2 little boxes: reserve, active duty.
Mm-hmm.
And I went there for reserve, to be in the reserves, and just spurred a moment. Active duty, and you could either sign for 4 years or 6 years. Active duty, 4 years. So I signed up. Went home. My mom freaked out. My girlfriend started crying. I'll never see you again. And but it was a done deal. And so when I signed up. They let me go home that day. They said, all right, be back tomorrow, 8 o'clock, and we're going to swear you in. So you stand up and you raise your right hand. You get sworn in. No, well, okay, it's not, okay, well, next week you got to go to boot camp. Now, they put me in a car, brought me to the airport, put me on the airplane, Cape May, New Jersey, February 3rd of whatever year it was, I think 85. And straight to boot camp. There was no way you were getting out of it. They weren't going to allow you.
Right.
And so 8 weeks in Cape May, New Jersey, February, middle of winter. I'm from Louisiana, where, you know, when it gets 30 degrees, we shut everything down.
Right.
Up there, you know, it's snow, and it was miserable.
What was Coast Guard boot camp?
And Coast Guard boot camp, you got to remember, okay, the Coast Guard is the smallest of the services. That there's more people on the largest Navy base. There's more people on that base than there is in the entire Coast Guard. So they have, I guess you want to call it Napoleon complex. I'm small, but I can keep up with anybody.
Right.
So their boot camp is excruciating. We had prior service Marines that would drop out. And it was just nonstop. Not only the physical, but the mental, just trying to stress you out, see who they could get to quit. At that time, I'm trying to remember how old it was, 25 maybe. I was the old man of the company. So everybody's kind of looking to me and like, man, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what to do. But anyway, it's, you get up 6 o'clock in the morning and it's automatic PT. Then you go to breakfast. Then they had classes. Then you do more PT. It's just nonstop to where you're worn out at the end of the day. And the absolute worst part of it was the running. I hate running. Not so much the physical part of it, just the mental boredom of run. And it seemed like everywhere you went, you had to run. You wore what they call boondockers, which was lace-up boots, weighed about 100 pounds. And anytime you were outside, if you weren't marching, you were not allowed to walk. You had to run. If you're going from your squad bay to the mess hall, you had to run. You didn't have to be in formation, but anywhere as you are outside, you run. You're not allowed to walk. And of course, you got the company commanders. They're stopping you every 5 minutes, just check you out and finding something wrong with you so they can make you do push-ups.
Sure.
And but it was 8 weeks, and probably, man, the worst night of it. They do squad bay inspections every week. No matter how squared away your squad bay is. And I mean, look, they check the sheets for hospital corners. They open your lockers, make sure that everything is stacked in there in a certain specific spot. And any error that they find, anything wrong they find is called a gig. Well, we were told 5 gigs or less. And you got, I don't know, it was like 30 people in here in the squad. And it was Golf Company 122. Anyway, we're told 5 gigs or less. So again, we look, well, we shine shoes, we everything, we made sure everything was squared away. And I'll never forget her name. She was QM1, which is quartermaster first class. She comes in, and she was one of the other company commanders. And she's going through the place, she finds 1, 2, 3. We know we got this whoop, man. There's no way they're gonna find 5 gigs. She takes out a bobby pin out of her hair. This is a cinder block building. Goes inside like one of the little air holes in the mortar and rakes out a little bit of dust. She said, that's it, 6 gigs. Like, oh shit. So they did what's called a white tornado. They made us go stand out in formation. This is the middle of winter in the snow. And they got her squad to come in and tear our squad apart. I mean, they took apart the racks, took the sheets off the bed. They threw them all out the window, 2nd-story building. They threw the racks, mattresses, all our belongings, everything out the window. It's out on the parade field. Company commander, EMC chief, he comes out there. He was our company commander. Says, you don't respect your squad bay, so you dirty bastards can just sleep out here in the snow tonight. So we're sitting out there, like all these people, you got teenagers, they're 18, 19 years old. And they got some of them starting to cry, we're gonna die. And I'm like, look, y'all just calm down. And it's coincidental they're just giving us survival training. So me and the old man's like, look, come on, everybody get them blankets. We had those old wool blankets. And they teach you about like if at sea your boat goes down or wherever, body warmth. If you got a group of people, you get together, you huddle, keep each other warm. So we take the blankets, we wrap them around us, we put blankets over the top, keep the snow off of us. And so they made us sit out there till about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and so then they said, all right, maybe y'all learned something. Now go get your shit off my parade, back in the squad bay, and then y'all can spend the rest of the night in squad bay. And fast forward 40 years, man, I'm really good friends on Facebook with QM1, and she actually remembers that, man. But small world.
Maybe I can talk to her one of these days.
Yeah, look, she, at a time when it wasn't real push to have women in the military, she was so squared away. When you become a company commander, you got your shit together. And she is now retired. Her and her husband live on a boat. They just, motor around Florida, live in the Florida Keys when they want. She has the life. And Actually, I'll try to connect you with her. She would be somebody good to interview.
That'll work. All right. So moving
So,
forward, your Coast Guard career.
all right, moving forward. Graduate boot camp, and my first duty station was Grand Isle, Louisiana. When I graduated boot camp, you're not gonna believe this, but I was so squared away. I was honor graduated, honor graduate, graduated first in my class.
Yeah.
So yeah, hey, I got the little ribbon to prove it. But anyway, so being that you graduate first in your class, you have first choice of the billet that you want to go to. And so they have your list, there's 30 people, you got 30 billets and duty stations. So I go up there, and out of boot camp, man, they got Hawaii, Puerto Rico, New York, San Francisco. And I say, Grand Isle, Louisiana. And the guy goes, whoa, wait a minute. Son, do you realize there's absolutely nothing in Grand Isle? And I said, yes, sir, I do. But I live 3 hours away, and I love to fish, and that's where I want to go. So I went from boot camp to 82-foot patrol boat to Point Sal out of Grand Isle. And have you ever been to Grand Isle? Are you familiar with it?
I don't think so. I mean, I know where it is. I've not been.
Well, it's changed a little bit now, but at that time, mid-'80s, it was a fishing village. Okay, they would bring a trailer down there and park it, and that was their fishing camp. Okay, very few, not a whole lot of residents, but it's a fishing town.
Right.
And give you a sense of their priorities, there was one restaurant, one grocery store, and 10 bar rooms. So that's what you do in Grand Isle. You fish and you drink.
Roger.
So we go down there, and I was with what you call a seaman, not a non-rate seaman. That's like an equivalent of beginning deckhand. And we had two seamen. There's a 10-man crew on that boat. And these 82 footers are built for the rivers of Vietnam. They have very shallow draft. And when you got out in the Gulf in 4 or 5 foot seas, man, it felt like the world was going to end. I mean, it was a very, very, very rough riding boat. And I did get seasick a few times, and it wasn't none of this, oh, I don't feel good. You still had to stay on your watch. So the non-rates are the ones that actually steer the boat. So you're up there, you're seasick, you got a little Ziploc bag or garbage bag in your pocket. When it comes time to puke, you pull it out, you puke in the bag, put a knot in it, put it back in your pocket for later. And there was no, I'm too sick, I can't stand my watch.
Right.
But that was my first experience with like the law enforcement side of drug enforcement of the Coast Guard, which that's a whole bunch of other stories. But the good thing about that job was, man, you actually did help people. They had a guy, I think it was during Hurricane Juan, bought a sailboat, thought he was Joe Nautical, decides he's going to go ride out the storm, a hurricane, not a storm, a hurricane, go ride it out in the Gulf. Well, at that time, Grand Isle had been evacuated. We were all thinking Lockport, and he starts sending out a distress call. Well, Coast Guard has a motto: you got to go out, but you don't have to come back. So in other words, somebody called, doesn't matter what the conditions are, you're going. So we go out there to rescue this guy, and we get him in tow, got him off his boat, bringing him and his boat back. And the hurricane, it came into the Gulf, it went back out, and it looped around Florida, and it came back in. So it was between us and the coast. So the only thing we could do was we went further south. So we're going south, and an 82-footer does not have a long range of, you don't have a lot of fuel.
Right.
So we're on the verge of running out of fuel. Luckily, the hurricane had subsided some, and they had one of the boats out of Galveston had to come rescue us and refuel us at sea so that we could get back. And But you know, if we wouldn't have, and this is why I say it's one of the greatest decisions ever made, because if we hadn't have been there, if we hadn't went out there, this guy would be dead. Him and his wife, they'd be dead.
Right.
No questions about it, dead. And the Grand Isle was an experience, man. Just trying to, you know, reminisce a little bit. It was my first experience in seeing dead bodies. First time was they had it was two brothers and their three sons. They had a open cabin cruiser that they went anchored offshore. They had a generator and they put a tarp over the back. And you know, when you got an exhaust leak and exhaust fumes come in, and where they laid down to go to sleep, that's where they died. And I'll never forget, man. We pulled that boat and they reported missing. The guy's wife reported missing. We went, found the boat, pulled it back, and man, those little kids, one of them was like maybe eight years old, sleeping on a settee in the front of it. And that's how when you looked at him, other than the color of their skin and foam coming out of their mouth, you just swore they were just sleeping.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my first experience with bodies.
Was that a frequent occurrence?
I don't want to say frequent, but it's oh man, I don't know, quite a few times a year.
Yeah.
We had another one. You know, that whole area is a shrimping industry, and they had the father and son working on a shrimp boat. Son fell overboard, and he didn't come up, and so they called us, and they actually wound up getting shrimp boats to drop their trawling nets and trawl the bottom to get, you know, to find the body. And this is kind of graphic, but you got to envision the crabs were running at the time, and this kid's body had been underwater for 36 hours, and the crabs were tearing him up. And so when we pulled it on that, we actually had to handcuff his father because his father wanted to try and kill himself.
Yeah.
And he felt responsible. So it happens more than you know, you don't hear about it in the news and stuff, but it happens. You know? So anyway, so I'm in Grand Isle. I was there for maybe a little over a year. When you come out of boot camp, like, they don't automatically send you to what's called your A school, where you go learn a specific job. A year later, you can apply to, you know, if depending on what your ASVAB scores were, you can apply for what your job is. So I wanted to be a quartermaster. Quartermaster in the Coast Guard and the Navy is you're dealing with navigation. It's not like in the Army where you're dealing with supply. It's strictly navigation, you know, like navigating on the charts, celestial navigation, and all of this really intrigued me. And so that's what I wanted to be.
All right.
And so I went to QM school in Yorktown, Virginia. And we were there for 3 months. And that's where you learn about latitude and longitude, plotting on the courses on the chart, the nav rules of road, you know, that we use every day in the marine industry. You're educated and all of that. And like I said, that was 3 months. At that time, a quartermaster was also what you call a signalman, where you learn Morse code, semaphore with the flags and flashing lights. I don't know if you ever seen some of these old movies when you got the two battleships, right? They're flashing lights at each other. It's Morse code, and it was the quartermasters that do that. The Navy, that's why we always give the Navy shit, because the Navy, you got quartermasters and you got signalmen. Coast Guard, you have quartermasters who are quartermasters and signalmen. You know, we do the job of two of them. You know, or I should say, it takes two of those guys to do our job. That's why I give the squid shit every time I can.
Yeah.
So in Yorktown, Virginia, which was cool, man. If you love history, it's a great place. And once again, it's in the wintertime. It seemed like every school I ever went to that was, you know, out of a tropical region was in the wintertime. And I hate cold weather. So up there.
They just wanted to make sure you liked it enough.
Yeah, yeah. So graduate from QM school, and I know you're not gonna believe this, but first in my class again.
Oh God.
Hey, I am what I am. So this time Hawaii is also on that billet, and one of my roommates, he was from Hawaii. He was on a seagoing buoy tender, and he was telling me all about it. I'm like, bro, I'm going to Hawaii. It is hands down, I'm going to Hawaii. Well, at that time, I wasn't married, and when you graduate from your A school, you have 10 days of leave, and then you have to go home, and then you have to go to your duty station. So we were planning on getting married in June. So I called my then girlfriend slash fiance, and God, I can't remember what month this was. But anyway, I said, hey, remember that, that wedding we got planned in June? Well, you got 10 days. Because when I come home, 10 days later, we got to go to Hawaii. So, wound up getting married, and first job duty station as a QM was on the Coast Guard cutter Sassafras, which is a seagoing buoy tender. And that was, I mean, just fantastic. But look, I was there I signed up for 4 years, but I had to extend because I volunteered to go to dive school, which I'll get to that point in a little bit. But it was just so, I don't know how to put it into words. We would, Hawaii is a beautiful place, okay? And we would have, if we would go, let's say if we went to Maui and we had 3 days of work, the entire crew would bust ass 24 hours, get it done in a day and a half. That way you had two days to go party, and
Right.
you're going to be a drunken sailor, okay?
How big was that buoy tender vessel?
You're going to love this, okay? When I first went to it, to me, man, it looked like a battleship, okay?
Okay.
And there's a 50-man crew. Seagoing buoy tender is 180 feet long and 37 feet wide.
All right.
So envision a regulation barge. It's smaller than a regulation barge. You have 50 people stationed on it, actually 52 stationed on it. And you get underway in something smaller than a regulation barge out into the South Pacific, which is, I think it's like 14 million square miles of nothing but ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And you really find out how minuscule, irrelevant that you are.
Yeah.
There's 14 million square miles of ocean, and if something happens, there is nobody to come get you.
Right.
So, and the boat was built in 1944, I believe. It was early 40s. It was World War II era.
Okay.
And but at that time, look, I got total trust in the command and the Coast Guard. Little did I know, about the true dangers that you were in. And a vessel that's so old, it's a single screw. So if the motor breaks down, you're shit out of luck.
Right.
The boat actually they had freshwater tanks, and you had, but it also made fresh water off the evats. But there was times when you were underway. This boat, I think the cruising speed was 11 knots, so roughly 14 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour. And you're talking about journeys of 1,000 miles. So, you're not making a lot of time. And so they would, you had to be extremely conservative on your water. And you ever heard the term a sea shower? Anybody in the military? Navy?
I have not.
All right. Well, what a sea shower consists of is that you step into the shower, you turn the water on. It's just cold water. It's not going to be any hot water. You turn it on. You do a 360. You turn it off. You soap up. Turn it back on. You do a 360. Turn it back off. And there's somebody standing at the shower making sure that you're not wasting water. And if you are lucky enough to wash the soap off, you're lucky. If not, well, you just deal with it. So it got to be pretty bad. But I really enjoyed the Coast Guard because it was very structured. It was a very structured environment. And I don't know, I just fit in. It was, like I say, it was the best decision I ever made in my life.
Was Hawaii your last duty station?
Yeah, that was my last duty station. But I did a lot of TAD, volunteer, called temporary assigned duty, because you know how they say don't volunteer for anything. I volunteered for everything.
Yeah.
If they had anything that I want, I volunteered for it. And but that duty station, not only was it in that horrible place, Hawaii, we went on our south trip. We went down to Samoa, which is an American territory.
Right.
And en route, we would go to Tahiti, Tonga, Rarotonga. It was rough duty, man. The sacrifice I made for my country is just unbelievable. And but I don't even know where to get with the SAS, man. Like I say, it was an ocean going buoy, a sea going buoy tender, and so we, like the name implies, we serviced the buoys around Hawaii and a bunch of the islands in the Pacific. And some of those buoys, they're so close to a coral reef that they really don't want the ship to go in there and pick it up with the boom, because they don't want to, get on the coral and punch a hole in the boat. So you have a dive team. And once again, it's one of the things that I volunteer for. And right now, the Coast Guard has their own rate. The divers have their own rating. That's their only job. But this was just collateral duty, if you want to call it. You volunteered for it. Coast Guard doesn't have their own dive school, so you had to go to Navy deep sea dive school, which was 12 weeks long on Ford Island in the middle of Pearl Harbor. And I forget how many people in my class, 30 people in my class, and I'm the only Coast Guard guy. So guess who's the guy that got picked on every single time?
Yeah.
Me. Yeah. That's okay. I could hang with it. And so I'll get back to dive school later. But a lot of times we used the divers to go out and they would pick up the buoy, disconnect it from the dead man on the bottom of it, bring it to the ship. They take care of all the painting and scraping all the barnacles and all that stuff off of it. And we would bring it back out and reconnect it. But they wanted the quartermasters to be the divers, because after you service it, you have to make sure it's on station. And the quartermasters, because we deal with navigation, and you're not gonna believe this is before GPS, okay? All they had was Loran C, and they had what was called SatNav, which was.
Are you telling me there was a time before GPS?
Oh yeah, I'm gonna tell you first. I got exposed when it's still top secret. So, but they would use the quartermasters to position the buoys because we use sextants. Okay, so instead of shooting stars, you had known towers, known objects on the land that you would use a sextant to triangulate to make sure it was on station. And because the quartermasters were trained with sextants, that's who they wanted on the dive teams. And it was, I mean, look, you're in Hawaii, you're getting paid to dive. How can it get any worse?
Yeah.
So let's see. So I volunteered for that to go to dive school, and which, oh man, that's an adventure in itself. It was, the Navy's got scuba divers, and then what they call deep sea divers, which is with the hard hat, surface supply air.
Right.
And that's the school that they sent us to, the deep sea dive school. And no matter how good a shape you're in, no matter how far you can run, they're going to find a way to stress you. That's probably the hardest thing I ever did in my life. But, hey, I did it. So I accomplished it,
Sure.
And once again, man, being a diver in the Coast Guard, when we would go to these islands, man, we went to, you're a history buff, I believe, Midway Island. I know most people should have heard of that.
Sure.
I actually got to dive at Midway Island, and you can see a few plane wrecks out there. And if you're a history nut, you really enjoy that stuff. I got
What
to
was the
dive.
what was the job? What were you diving for?
You go like say, well, like I was saying earlier, like when they have a buoy and
Right,
it's too close to a shoal for
right.
the ship to it, you go disconnect, and the divers would dive down, disconnect it, bring the chain and buoy to the ship so they could service it and then bring it back over and
So it
reconnect
was the
it.
same. You were servicing buoys at Midway.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
got you.
That was the whole purpose of us going there. Uh, and I'm trying to think. Midway Island, man. All right, here goes a sea story for you. We're diving, and and the water's nice and clear. You know, we're diving about 40 feet down, and at the corner of my eye, I see a shark. But sharks are pretty cool looking underwater. And when you look at them in the eye, it's just pure death. It's like there's nothing behind that eye, no soul, nothing, just black death. Well, you see one, hey, he's pretty cool. So I get back to working. At the corner of my eye, see another one. And when you're diving, where visibility ends, it kind of looks like just a shower curtain hanging. Well, in that shower curtain, I can see the faint outlines of all these tails. And they got 20, 30 sharks circling around where we're diving at. So, like, excuse my language, but I'm like, fuck, I can get out of here, man. Well,
Right, right.
you always dive in pairs, okay? Well, my partner had went up to go get a couple more tools out of dive boat. And so he's up, and I'm still down there 40 feet below. I start crawling up that chain, boy. And I reach down and grab my knife. I'm looking at, I got a little 4-inch blade knife, and you got, a 10-foot shark. Yeah, okay. So going up. And then when I look, I see my partner, he's going back down, and he's, 15, 20 feet away. He can't see me. I'm like, shit, can't leave him down there, man. So I go back down there, tap him, tell him look around. He sees all the sharks. And this guy, he was a prior Navy EODT. So these guys they ain't scared of shit. And he's like, fuck this. And look, excuse my language, brother. There's a reason for the phrase cuss like a sailor, and I am one.
All
So
good. All good.
we go up, and the dive boat that we're working out of, you couldn't just get out of the water and get into the boat. You had to actually be physically pulled. So we're like, man, get us out, get us out. They got sharks everywhere. And the guy's looking at me like, ha, yeah, right. Well, Kirby Slimmons, that's the guy I was diving with. He's like, get me the fuck out of here. So they grab us out. They pull me first.
Yeah.
And as they're pulling him, shark comes under the boat, and swim fins that you wear, it
Right.
takes a chunk out of the bottom of it
Hmm.
as they're pulling him out. You're sitting in that dive boat, and excuse my language, you're like, fuck this, fuck this, fuck you, bring me back to the fucking ship.
Right. Right.
And so we ended the diving for that day. But it was once again, man, like I say, it was the best decision I ever made in my life. And
When did you get to finish that job on that buoy? Did you have to wait for the sharks to leave, or how does that work?
oh yeah, we went to the next day. Reef sharks, they come in the morning and feed, and they go out, and then they come back in the afternoons. And
Okay.
they were what you call black tips. And so we just waited. And the next day we went out and dove. There wasn't any other sharks.
I've never had to plan my job around a shark's eating schedule, but not something I ever thought about. All right. So what happens next with the Coast Guard?
Okay. Man, it's so much, another, you want to say sea story, while I was off on the sassafras, we got a ship had radioed in that he had seen a sailboat. He reported a sailboat, and they had, the official number on the hull of the sailboat that had been missing for like 6 months. It left Tahiti, and it was supposed to be en route, I think, to Samoa. But anyway, they reported. So we go out to get this boat, and we were trying to make a decision on whether to pick the boat up, put it on our ship, or just tow it back. Well, when we go over there, and I was part of a boarding team, I was also a boarding officer. We go over there to do the boat, to board the boat, see what the condition is. And the sailboat's kind of rocking with the waves. and you hear this clump, 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 clump.
Okay.
I go on there, and it was supposed to be a man and a woman. The woman is missing. The man, the clump, clump sound was his skull rolling around on the deck, and the skeleton of his body was sitting there. They had a little bit of flesh left on it, and they had these giant flesh-eating cockroaches on that boat.
Oh
So,
my.
needless to say, yeah, we didn't pick that boat up. We towed it back to Honolulu, and when and we couldn't even bring it into port. We had to anchor it offshore so they could get somebody to fumigate it.
Right.
And I never knew. I don't think they ever found a woman, and they're thinking either he killed her or she just jumped overboard, but he died on the boat. And
Yeah.
I got one more sea story for you with
Sure.
the Coast Guard, and then I'll
Sure.
leave that alone. Back I said, you're making a difference by joining the Coast Guard. One of the biggest rescues, if you want to say it, we did, it was a ship Volca, and we rescued 26 crew members off of it. Sassafras had been on a 6-month dry dock period in Bellingham, Washington, and we were en route back to Honolulu. And when we left Bellingham, we went up through Alaska, the inside straits, unbelievably beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back, and we'd been away from home for 6 months. Okay, so we're timing it so that we can arrive at the pier at 8 o'clock. Everybody's kids, families, everybody's gonna be there to greet us. Okay, so we're quartermasters. We're adjusting our speed so we can time it perfectly. We're so close to Hawaii that when you look on the horizon, you can see the glow from the lights of downtown Honolulu.
Mm-hmm.
So we got to slow our speed. Then we get the call, and the ship turns 180 degrees. There was this ship sinking that was like, I don't know, maybe 2-3 days away. We were already underway. Nobody else would be the first unit to be able to get there. So imagine how upset the crew was when you can see your house, well, not at your house, but you see the glow of the lights, and you got to turn, and you're gonna be gone for another week or so.
Right.
So we get on scene. Bow of the ship is underwater, and Coast Guard jets had flown by and dropped off pumps so they could try and dewater it. They just couldn't keep up. Got on scene, and we got the crew. They didn't want to leave it at first, but we made them. We made them leave the ship and get on board our ship. That night, and that when we got there late in the afternoon, that night around 10 o'clock, in less than 10 seconds, that ship sank.
Wow.
And I was watch when it sank, and as it's sinking, the generator's still running, and you can see the light, the deck lights still glowing as it's going down, and then they just cut off.
Right.
So we had everybody aboard, and here's one of the key things: the life rafts that were on that ship, they're supposed to automatically turn loose. None of them popped up. So if we would have been 10 hours late, if we wouldn't have been there, those 26 people would be dead.
Right.
And so, once again, when you join the Coast Guard, you're making a difference.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's where I ended my Coast Guard career, on the Sassafras in Hawaii.
What rank were you at the time?
I got out as an E5, which quartermaster second class. I was up to make first. I'd taken all the tests, passed all my tests, had my time and grade, and I was just waiting for the promotion list to come out. So I probably would have made first, but one of the reasons I got out was my daughter was born. My daughter Angel was born. I left when she was 3 days old, and I didn't see her till her first birthday. So that kind of, man, I don't know if I can, I loved my job, but it makes it hard on family life.
Right.
So that's when I decided to get out the Coast Guard, and came back, Plaquemine, Louisiana. And when I first came back, I had no intention on getting on another boat. Was going to build cabinets in my grandfather's shop where I'm sitting at right now. Was going to just do woodwork, cabinets, and whatever else. He had a shop where he didn't so much build cabinets, but he built entrances to houses, the doors, the side lights, the transom. Been doing it. He was at that time, I think he was 70, and he'd been, a carpenter his whole life. So I was just gonna work my way into the family business and just take over the shop when he retired.
Sure.
And sitting here, I know I was doing okay, but I needed to make some extra money. Christmas time was coming up. I needed to make some extra money. So I said, you know what? I knew a guy. This is one of these boatmen I referred to earlier. His name was Stanley. Good God, he could run a boat, man. Anyway, he's another pilot from Plaquemine. And I called him up because my sister-in-law was married to his son. And I said, Stanley, man, can you give me a job, man? I just want a deck for a few months so I can build up some time, build up some money.
Yeah.
And just about 3 months. He said, yeah. He said, look, come on over. And I'll tell Tommy, who's in engineering. He was the guy. He didn't have a title. He's the one that did the hiring. And so I came in to put out an application, and he said, oh yeah, Stanley told me you were coming. And I happened to have Navy Deep Sea Dive School t-shirt on, Well, Tommy is ex-Navy. So he said, all right, man, you're hired. So they hired me. I think this was 1990, right around 1990.
Yep.
And just wanted a part-time job. And here, 32 years later, I'm still at Capital Fleet.
Yeah. That little part-time 14 and 7 job right there.
I was 10 and 5, man.
Oh,
5
that's
days,
right.
5 nights. Yeah, 10 and 5.
Right.
And I see at that time, well, that's what it was. When he interviewed me, he saw the experience I had. He saw that I was quartermaster because he was Navy. He knew what quartermasters were. He asked me, says, you think you can get your license? And I'm like, yeah, I can get it. I'm really interested in running a boat, but I can get it. And so he says, you get your license and you change your mind, we'll put you in the wheelhouse. I'm like, all right, sounds good. And at that time, you didn't have the steersman program. You got, you had to have a specific amount of time on deck. You went and took the test. And if you passed, you got your license, and then you bullshitted somebody into letting you run a boat.
Yeah. So when you joined up with them, you were just deckhand?
Yeah, I was just a deckhand.
All right.
And I was decking with the intention on getting my license, because later on, what he told me, he said, look, we're going to be getting a crew boat. At that time, Baton Rouge Harbor didn't have a crew boat service. Capital Marine had left Baton Rouge and went down to Triangle Fleet. And so there was no crew boat service in the Baton Rouge Harbor. And they were going to get their own crew boat and try to start a little crew boat service. And so that was the intention. Deck, get your license. Then when we get the crew boat, we'll get you as one of the pilots on the crew boat. And they call it the Muskrat. That was the name of the boat. A little flat deck, flat bottom. I think it had 2 outboards on. I forget what side, but it was scooped. It was fun handling a little boat.
Yeah.
So we were a combination launch boat operator and nighttime security guard at the gate. And that lasted for wasn't quite a year. And crew boat service just wasn't making it. And I don't know, for some reason, I guess I bullshitted them good enough. They decided to put me in the office. They offered me, look, if you want to come be a dispatcher. So I was like, yeah, I don't want to lose my job, because by now I done got used to, I got accustomed to having a paycheck coming in.
Right.
So I decided I'm going to stay here. So they moved me in the office, and I was a combination dispatcher. Bill Grantham was the owner. You cannot work for a better guy. He was the absolute best. And he had also had Acadian Marine, which was a brokerage. So they broke me into being a broker. We handled Acadian Marine, the brokerage. We dispatched, and when needed, I ran the crew boat. And so it was me, Tommy, and a lady by the name of Allison. We were the 3 dispatchers, and we would rotate on call.
All right.
And that lasted for, I don't know, maybe a year, maybe a little longer, a year and a half. And that was, I don't remember the exact year that it took place, but that was when, man, insurance rates in the marine industry skyrocketed. So they had to lay off people. Bill hated it, but he had to lay off people. And we had two boats working for us at the time, the Port Allen, and he would lease a boat. They had like the Lady G3, and I forget one of the other ones that he leased, but he had to lay half the people off. This is how great of a guy Bill Grantham was. Called everybody in. We were having a captain's meeting / company meeting. It's all the pilots, deckhands, and Bill's there. And a good friend of his, Glenn McKinney, is also there. And so he tells us, he says, look, things are getting tight. I hate to say this, but I have to lay everybody off on the second boat. We have to lay y'all off. And part of that laying off was they had to lay me off out of the office. Said, but this man right here, Glenn McKinney, is going to hire y'all. Coan, you're going to go in the wheelhouse. Now, I'll tell you more about that in a second. So he knew he was going to have to lay us off, but he arranged for somebody else to hire us. So you never missed a leg. You never missed a check, never missed a day.
Right.
And the other thing about it was that, I don't know the financial portion of it, but because the interest rate was so high, it was cheaper for him to lease a fully found boat and crew from Glenn and have it work in our fleet. So actually our jobs never changed. It just went, instead of having a Capital Fleet paycheck, we got a McKinney Fleet paycheck.
Right.
So I went from crew boat operator, dispatcher to you're going to be in the wheelhouse as a pilot. So you know, look, I got a little experience, but I can't run a boat. And but once again, Bill's like, he said, look, they're going to have a pilot train you. And so I'm like, okay, sounds good, man. And guy's name was Jerry, and he was supposed to train me. So we were on a boat called a Tater Bug, and we're working in Capital Fleet. And you know, look, I'm running a boat. Jerry's sitting in the back, and he's teaching me. He's schooling me, and you know, baptism by fire, put you in the worst condition, in predicament, and then figure your way out of it. Right. So he's training me, and I guess about maybe 3 weeks later, come to work and working nights. So, well, Cap, you got it? I'm like, yeah, I'm ready. Where? No, son, you don't understand. You got it. We fired. So I'm like, holy shit, you know. And luckily enough, I was working with a group of people who kind of took me under their wing and schooled me as I was going. And so I ran the second, what we call the second boat, which is Tater Bug. Then maybe a year after that, business had picked back up, the insurance stuff got straightened out, and Bill bought another boat, and he hired everybody back. And that boat, which is now the Ace G, it was named after Bill's daddy, Ace Grantham.
Okay.
And it had belonged to Bushnell Towing, which I think was a Kathleen 2 at the time. And Bill bought it, repowered it, did a bunch of work to it, and he put us all on it. So I ran that boat. I ran a second boat for maybe a year. And then they had an opening on the lead boat. And they transferred me to lead boat, Port Allen. And once again, I don't know exactly what year that was. But so then I started running lead boat and working on the Port Allen. And, are you hearing that noise? That popping?
It's fine.
Okay. It's not gunshots, it's acorns falling on the top of the roof. Anyway, so I'm working on the Port Allen as lead boat, and at that time, Bill didn't have the benefits that you really wanted. You know, the good retirement and the good medical and stuff. He did what he could. That time, in custom fuel. Let me back up a little bit. I used to work. We worked 10 and 5, and when I would get on my 5 days off, I was friends with Mike, who is on the Sandy B now for Ingram, and him and he only worked. There was only 2 pilots on the Peter J at the time, and he wanted days off. The guy I was working with didn't want any days off. So when I would get on my days off, I'd go fill in for. I'd take one day off and I'd work, 4 days on the P2J. Well,
Okay.
a little later, Custom Fuel decided to put a boat in Baton Rouge. That was a Jerry deal. And I hate to do it, but Bill totally understood and he supported me, just right. And so I went to work. I quit Capital Fleet and I went to work for Custom Fuel on the Jerry deal.
Okay.
And we also, not only did we work for Custom Fuel, we also, we had a deckhand. They put one deckhand on there. We worked the fleet. We actually worked the fleet just as much as what we did fuel jobs, and with one deckhand. And so did that for 3 years. And when you were the pilot on that, like I say, you did work for Custom Fuel, you did fleet work, but you were also a tankerman. So when they had transfers to be done, they didn't have two tankermen watch, the pilot and the tankerman, the shoreside tankerman. We went out there and did the transfers, loading the fuel flats. And when we were real busy, you had to also do the fuel job. I guess that went on for 2.5, 3 years, and they had a lead boat open. And I can't complain about Custom Fuel, okay? It was just it was a good job. But I don't know why, but Bill made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and so I quit Custom Fuel, and I went back to work for Capital on the lead boat. And I don't remember what transpired, but he needed a lead boat pilot. Nobody else wanted it. I always say that nobody's stupid enough to take that lead boat job. So then I went back to work for Capital Fleet and on the lead boat on the Port Allen. And that's where I've been ever since. So the very first tugboat I ever set foot on was the Port Allen. I'm now on the Port Allen for the last, I don't know, it's been 20 something years continuously. And I truly hope that's the last boat I ever run. I don't want to run another boat. There's been some discussion about building new fleet boats. And I'm like, well, tie up one of these other boats, leave me on the Port Allen. But the boat spoils you. It's fast, it's quick, it's maneuverable, and I truly don't want to run another boat. I hope my career ends on that boat.
How many more years you got?
Health holds out 6.5, man. I'm one of those ones I can't retire at 65. I got to retire because I'm greedy. I want my full Social Security.
Yep.
I have to work till I'm 67, and so if my health holds out, I got 6.5 more years, and hopefully they're all on the Port Allen.
All right. Well, switching gears, you said Angel was born. Was this your second wife?
Yes.
All right. What's Angel up to?
She is a radio tech. I mean, not a radio tech. She takes X-rays, X-ray techs, X-ray
Okay.
tech.
All right.
When she was in high school, she graduated in high school. Everybody was pushing her, man, you need to do this. You got to go do this. And I'm one of these parents that you step back, you let your child find their own road. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And one of her teachers had pushed her. She got a scholarship from one of the local chemical plants so she could be an operator. And it just wasn't her, and they pushed her and so she went into school for that. Grades weren't very good, and she quit, and I told everybody, I said, y'all just all need to shut up, back up, let her do her thing.
Right.
So she decided to go to X-ray tech school. It really excelled at it, and she was hired before she ever graduated, and she's done really well at that.
Good for her.
It's good. Yeah, you don't need to steer your children's life. You need to let them find their own course.
Yeah. I know you live on a golf course now and you got a wood shop to play with. Anything interesting about all that?
Absolutely, man. All right. So I'm on my third wife. Love her to death. Soulmate. Hope she's listening to this. Can't get any better. So we got married. We had bought a house. And we were in that house for like maybe a year and a half at the most. Guy at work, another pilot on the Port Allen. He said, man, look, I got an extra set of golf course clubs. You want them? And I'm like, yeah, okay. All right. Now, we're not living on a golf course at this time, okay? So he gives me golf clubs. I go out there, start hitting the balls, and if you haven't played golf, it is addictive. Okay, it's 10 times worse than crack. It is addictive. So I get hooked on the game. Now, wife and I have been married about a year and a half. We got this house we've been living in year and a half. And I say, and the name of the golf course here is the Island. I say, Vicky, what do you think about living on the island? She goes, yeah, I guess. I said, good, because at 3:00 we got an appointment to look at a house. So she's like, oh, you really planning this out, huh? So we go and we look at this house, and and it's a fairly nice house. And we get back in the car, and for a few seconds we don't say a word, and we just look at each other, and simultaneously in stereo we go, sold. And so we bought that house, and we've been living there 11 years now.
Gotcha.
And yeah, so and what's great about it is that I keep my clubs on the back porch. When I get the want, I can just walk out the backyard and go play golf. It might just be 1 hole, 2 holes, 18 holes, but it's right there.
Said golfing in between cups of coffee and reading books, huh?
Absolutely. I love to read, man. Love to read. I try to read at least an hour a day. And the start of my perfect morning is a fresh pot of coffee, not some of that weak ass Starbucks dirty water coffee, some real true coffee. And can't be cold either, got to be hot. Sitting on the back porch right when the sun's coming up with a book in my hand, and sit there and read for an hour or two, and then get busy with the rest of my day.
Yep.
But I love reading. I've been that way since a kid. And got a pretty decent library. I'm always looking for more books, wide range of books too. I don't like a lot of fiction, but and then you made reference to my woodworking. If I'm not at work, and this is actually taking a priority over the golf, I'm in my wood shop. It was built by my grandfather. My grandfather was a carpenter all his life, and when he quote retired, he opened his shop just to build doors, big doors, like entryway doors. And it was built in 1978, and it's on the Plaquemine Bayou. When I look out the back window, I'm looking at the bayou, and I piddled around with him even when he was a carpenter. Like, I've been piddling around with woodworking since I was 12 years old. And when he passed away, I inherited the shop. And there's a sign in the back of it that my aunt had made for him, and it says Bush's Garden of Eden. And this is heaven for me. This is, I can come here and time stops when I start working on some of my projects.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, they even, I don't know if you've seen it, Ingram, when they had their own little magazine, they came down and interviewed me. And they said the title of it was, I think, Towboats and Table Saws. And they did a little interview on me. And but this is where I like to be at. The majority of my woodworking, and I've got a big stash, man. I've got walnut, cherry, a little bit of purple heart, a few exotics, but the absolute most beautiful wood that I have is Louisiana Sinker cypress. And they quoted me when I said, and just I spurred them on, I said, Louisiana Sinker cypress, it's the most beautiful wood God ever made.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'll tell you more about that in a second, but this is where I like to be. I just love my time in the shop. When I get focused on a project, like I say, time stops, and this is where I want to be.
So how did you first encounter this Louisiana Sinker cypress you love so much?
Well, I'd done some work before with cypress, and there was a guy down in Bassal that he was a crawfisherman, and his hobby was he started going recover these cypress logs. And I had met up with him, and so I went down there to see what he had, and I bought a couple pieces of it. And just real quick on what sinker cypress is, back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, back when they used to cut these trees down, this was virgin forest, old growth virgin forest. Some of these trees were so dense that when they cut them, they would literally sink, they wouldn't float. And at that time, they didn't care. There were trees everywhere. And so that's where the tree stayed. And over the last 150, 200 years, sitting down in the mud, the minerals in the mud is what gives it a unique color. And one of the things about it is like walnut, cherry, you're going to get the same color. It's never going to change. This, every single board is different. And
Right.
I love the history. I love the history of it and the color of it. I got a piece sitting on my desk, on my workbench here. It's going to be my dining room table. I wish I could show you a picture of it. You're going to have to come see it when it's done. But this piece of wood, and I love the history of it, okay? This tree was cut down with an axe. This piece of wood that's on my workbench now, when the tree was cut down, it was 1,100 years old. And that was roughly 200 years ago. So you're looking at a piece of wood that's 1,400 years old.
Right.
And it's still got on the end of it where they cut it with the axe. You can still see the axe marks where these guys cut them down because they didn't have chainsaws back then. You know, if someone's not familiar with the Louisiana logging, they used to go in the swamp, and these were men. Okay, none of the sissy boys they got nowadays. These were men. They would stand up in a pirogue, little bitty boat. Now imagine trying to balance yourself, stand up in a boat, and chopping these trees down with an axe. And you got malaria, mosquitoes, snakes, you know, everything out there. And this is what they did day in, day out. So you're chopping on this tree. And like the slab that I have on mine, it's right now, it's just under 5 foot wide. And this is one of the narrow boards. This tree, when they pulled it up out of the swamp, it was, I think, 9 feet across. And imagine cutting that with an axe. And then you spend all these hours and it sinks when you cut it. You talk about heartbreaking.
Right.
But anyway, so that's where, you know, that's where the sinker cypress comes from. And the guy that I get it from, he was a crawfisherman. And his hobby was he would go find these logs that are sunk in the swamp and they would raise them, bring them to his house. He had made a little kiln to dry it in. And he started doing that, and it wound up being a full-time business for him. He makes these big conference tables. You know, some of these conference tables that he makes, they're 5 foot wide, 18, 20 foot long, solid 3-inch piece of wood on the top. And
Right.
pretty amazing stuff. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. And so whenever that day comes and I do retire off the Port Allen, hopefully, this is where I'll spend the rest of my time in my shop.
Well, that sounds good, man. I know you got another hour or so before you got to get to work, but I do appreciate your time, man. Good stories. Anything else you want to share?
Lee, that's it, man. If we ever have a round 2 with this, I'll come up with some more sea stories because I got a bunch of them.
Thanks
All
again,
right.
bud.
Appreciate it. Thank you, buddy.
Talk to you
I'll
later.
talk to you later.
All right.